This evening.
Great.
Hosting this evening will be myself, Lamar Pinson, and Rock Andre. We have four wonderful guests, and we'd like to thank everyone for coming out this evening and supporting us. Our first guest is Frank Merrick. Frank Merrick is president of Foundation Management Corporation, vice president of the Merrick Foundation, and president of Wardhead American Corporation. Merrick is a graduate of Oklahoma State University. Frank holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration. He has also completed postgraduate work in business administration and participated in numerous professional training seminars and workshops. Frank formed in October 2000 Foundation Management Corporation, administers private foundations, Oklahoma Educational Technology Trust, and Communities Foundation of Oklahoma. FMI assists clients in developing investment policies, hiring and reviewing asset managers, reviewing grant proposals, making recommendations of funding opportunities, handling of all meeting arrangements, understanding government regulations and filing, as well as maintaining minute books and all accounting records. Current client assets exceed $225 million. He stated I keep it short because he's got something going on. He's got a band coming in here to introduce himself. Our next guest is Joe Merrifield. Joe Merrifield as well. He is also a Oklahoma State graduate in marketing and an emphasis in computer science. In 1981 through 1982, Tandy Corporation hired Joe as a marketing representative in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Joe was over sales and installation of microcomputers through private and public sectors. Joe worked with American Airlines, Telex Integris, and other large companies, integrating the use of microcomputers with their management teams and interfacing them with their mainframe systems. In 1982, Joe began with Merrifield Office and School Supply Corporation as Vice President of Finance. Joe is responsible for all data accounting and government compliance at all locations in management of Stillwater, Oklahoma. Joe wrote and developed the in-house software for Merrifield Office and School Supply. The business currently has annual sales of $5 million with 40 employees in 5 locations. Those locations include Enid, Ponca City, Alva, Stillwater, and recent expansion in Oklahoma City. Some of Joe's accomplishments and memberships are Joe is from 2001 to 2007. Joe was a member of Oklahoma Board of Private Vocational Schools. 2006 to present, Joe is a member of OSU Alumni Association. 2003 to present, Joe is also a member of OSU Leadership Council. 2001 to present, he is a member of the Associates Spear School of Business. Joe was recently appointed to the Stillwater Planning Commission. Joe is a member of many other boards, committees, and civic clubs over 30 years. Joe Merrifield and his wife, Kelly, have 2 children, Sarah and Henry. Both children are OSU graduates, have recently returned to Stillwater to join the family business. If anyone has any contact with Mike Gundy, Joe has 4 years availability and more than welcome to play.
Go folks.
Our next host, Rock Andre, will introduce the next 2.
Andrea Nielsen always enjoyed business. She was the youngest registered buyer at the Dallas Trade Mart at the age of 5. She was 5 when she opened her department in her family business, Nielsen's Exclusive Gifts, in Brookside, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Nielsen's Exclusive Gifts was started by her parents, Dorothy and Arthur Nielsen, in 1946. They started their vision of a fine gift store in a little rental house with a $200 loan from Andrea's grandfather. Their wedding gifts were their first inventory. Her dad made lamps of people's antique vases, and her mother handmade shapes for the lamps. They lived in the back, and Nielsen's was in the living room. After graduating from Edison High School, she attended Kansas University, where she enjoyed being in the theater department. She spent her college summers at University of Texas, Tulsa University, and working at Nielsen's Exclusive Gifts. She transferred to OSU after her freshman year and was there until she graduated. She studied many subjects and earned a Bachelor of Art with a major in sociology. During her senior year at Oklahoma State University, she opened a gift store at the student union named Work. She said it was fun and successful. Andrea considered this store as her graduate school. She operated her campus store for 5 years. Afterwards, she sold the business in order to move to Tulsa. In Tulsa, she helped her parents at Nielsen's, which was then in the first mall in Oklahoma. However, she wanted to try something new. She got her real estate license and sold real estate for a family business. She enjoyed real estate and the freedom that business provided. It allowed her the time to join Junior League, become a docent at Philbrook Art Museum, the Gamma Phi Beta House Corporation Board, and the OSU Arts and Science Board. She went to UCLA for art education, snow sky, and scuba dive. After a few years, her father convinced her to come back into the family business, Nielsen's Exclusive Gifts. She began managing Nielsen's in 1982 and completed the purchase of the store in 1990. She is currently operating Nielsen's Exclusive Gifts at its third location in Tulsa. November 11, 2011, or 11/11/11, Nielsen's will celebrate being in business for 65 years. Andrea married Gary Bartlett in 1996. Gary and Andrea adopted their daughter Faye in 2001. She's now 13. They adopted their daughter Anika in 2005. She's now 8. Andrea is currently spending lots of time with her daughters and her husband while still operating Nielsen's Gifts with lots of help from her family and her employees. Andrea wants to study more about nutrition, wellness, visualization, spirituality, and especially how the mind affects all aspects of our being. Let's welcome Andrea Nielsen Bartlett.
I come with baggage.
Andrea has with her her husband, Gary Bartlett. Gary is a graduate from OSU. He runs a family business called Bartlett Equipment Company. And we have the pleasure to welcome Gary Bartlett.
Well, thank you, Rock and Lamar. I think that was very well done, and I think you'll have to agree with me that we have an impressive array of entrepreneurs lined up for this evening. And I'm trying to figure out who I should start the questions with, and I decided, well, I'm going to skip the gender ladies first, and I'll go for alphabetical order. So Andrea, we'll start with you. Okay, I'll ask the question, and kind of each one of you have a shot at that, and it's okay if there's a lot of duplication in your responses as well. One of the first slide said that family is from Venus and business is from Mars. What do you think of that? Is there any truth
Well,
to that?
it makes me laugh, for sure, but they are both planets, right? They're out there in the same solar system. They're different, and yet they have to merge together to make a family business really work. I mean, it's just family and business. If you're in family business, the lines really are not well defined. You can try compartmentalization, you can try a lot of things, but they're different, and yet they can merge together, and everyone learns to work and has a great work ethic. They can be great together.
Why don't you want to just tell us your story, your life story?
My story, graduated from OSU in '77, worked at Stillwater National Bank for about 3 years. My father became ill, and I was asked to move back to Ardmore, Oklahoma and take over our family oil and gas business. You all don't remember, but those were some pretty good times in the oil and gas business that lasted about 4 or 5 years, and then it became not so good. But I worked for my family during that for 14 years, and we sold our company in 1994. I moved to Oklahoma City and worked for the Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation as a professional fundraiser for 3 years. Worked for Bank of Oklahoma in their trust department for 3 years, and then started my own business in 2000, and my family hired me back again to run the family business again. I thought I'd moved far enough away that I didn't have to do that anymore, but apparently I didn't. And so I run my own business, and which is a family business, and then I run my family's family business, which is in the oil and gas and real estate business.
Charlie?
I work with Merrifield Office Supply. It's nothing too pretty or sexy. I started school in '77. Got out in '81.
I still got more hair than you do.
There you go. When I went to work in Tulsa, it was during this oil boom that he was talking about, and it was a really exciting time, and I mean a very bountiful time for Oklahoma and an easy time. We kind of have an unwritten rule in our business that you can't come to work for the business without working for others. That it wasn't set in place at that time, but after a year and a half of that, and we joined up with my father's business, which was just starting. So we really weren't generation 2. We were kind of generation 1.5, so we really haven't gone through the first. But to just give you a nuts and bolts synopsis, we started in Enid in '81, my father did, and he is the entrepreneur. He's the guy that wasn't playing with the house money, he was playing with his own money. And that is the risk, and why I think we take it more serious maybe than a regular business would take it, because it's our money. But then my brother Stan and I came and joined the business in '82. That is when the oil bust hit. We were able to sell a ton of stuff, just not get paid for it. And so we went through two or three very, very difficult years and very seasoning years. And we finally kind of learned how to operate in that type of a business climate. And in '86, we kind of got our feet under us and started Ponca City. In '89, we did Alva. In '92, we did Stillwater. In '97, we kind of had some trouble getting consistent management here in Stillwater, so I moved over here. One of the things we've done, we have 40 employees, and I figured out when I was going to do this that 25% of our employees are family, which is probably a higher percentage possibly than you deal with. And so what we figured out we could do is put them in different cities, and that works a little bit, but you can't separate it. We had one advantage in that my father was a high school football coach and later superintendent, but he had a very militaristic type approach, and that kind of got us an excellent footing. Well, now generation 3 is coming in as my children, son and daughter, have joined the company here in Stillwater, and my business partner, my father's no longer active in the company, but my business partner Stan in Enid, his son has also joined the company. And we were very close to pondering selling the company and had some decent offers, and now the ship must stay sailing. So the planning of the succession is a currently constantly evolving issue. But that's kind of how we got where we are. We're currently about a $5 million a year company that has 40 employees, and we've dispersed out. And recently, my brother, who was working with me, another brother, and his son, who was working with me here in Stillwater, we've recently expanded to Oklahoma City, and it's our first bigger application, and excited about that. But I'm kind of the poster child. I was looking at some of these statistics. We're the one hanging on to maybe try to be one of the 15% that hits into the third generation, and we get very close to having a bulletproof succession plan or buyout or all of the things in place, and it changes. A father gets a divorce. Some kids join a company. And you could spend all the money you have on legal people trying to stay up with that evolution. We have not done it well, and we need to do it better. So I'm going to be the poster child of some of the things you don't want to do here tonight. That's our
Thanks, Joe. Well, Andrea, Rock gave us pretty comprehensive.
I think it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah,
Now, I
but-
do have a low-tech PowerPoint if you'd like to see it.
You can go for it.
I just thought I'd show you a few things that just might. I wondered if learning about business could possibly be start in the womb or maybe in DNA, because my grandparents, my father's parents, had a little store in Racine, Wisconsin. You can pass me these around. And they sold candy and what? Oh, okay. And my parents got married and they had a vision. I am big, like he kind of mentioned, Brock mentioned, on visualization in general and visualizing good things happening and good things coming. My mother probably started visualizing our store when she was taking voice lessons, and the piano teacher had a beautiful vase on her piano. And she learned there are gorgeous things that can decorate your home. And then they probably, I'm probably the succession plan they thought of when they were about 40 and had me. But they started their little store in a little rental house in Brookside in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this is significant for my big announcement at the end of it. But they had their succession plan, and there's the little store. They lived in the back of the store and sold out of the living room. Had one part-time employee, and raising the next one, which is me. My dad made all the furniture in the store, including this table that you might be able to see from this 50s photo. They built on the store onto the front of the house because it was not a throwaway society then. They kept everything, reused everything. You think being green is new. It isn't. It was a necessity at that time. And when you're in a family business, the big thing is you work. And everybody works together, and that's me sweeping the sidewalk at that location, which is really fun. But visualizing the store growing, visualizing people coming in. My grandfather that lent the $200 came back to see how things were going, see how his investment was going, and if that son-in-law was really doing a good job. And he was. That work ethic is such a big part of it. And you know, although you might, if you're really interested in business, you might not, you always hear work smart, not work long. Well, if you're not that smart, you can work long. You know, you can have tenacity get you through an awful lot of things. And if you don't have that, it's probably not a good idea to go in business for yourself. But in the 70s, I was in college here and started a store in the student union called Grok. And a friend of mine made this poster for me back then, which I kept because I thought it was the sign of the times. But the business lesson here is if you're planning a long-term business, don't name it a current short-term name. If you ever read Stranger in a Strange Land in 1970-something, you know exactly what grok is. To grok something is to know what it's like to be it, to be the something. Well, what does that mean to you all today when you hear the word grok? Nothing, so don't name your business something currently trendy. You know, trendy's fun if it can come and go, but this was me in my store in the student union in the 70s. You can see the look. But my biggest sales pitch probably ever was convincing the powers that be to rent me a store, a student, in the student union. But they did, because tenacity, I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. And here I am looking at that box, like many employees today see me looking at boxes, wondering, who am I going to sell that stuff to? So that was that. My dad was a great artist and businessman. This is the head designer of Waterford Crystal. He found Waterford Crystal in Market. There was a little cut crystal pitcher down at the bottom of another showroom, and my dad said, bring that in, I can sell that. We were the very first people to sell Waterford Crystal in Oklahoma. started the trend. And then we moved the store from the first mall in Oklahoma, after I purchased it, to a shopping center, the Plaza. And the reason this was a newspaper article about our move and me with some Waterford. But the reason I really bring that up is my dad was totally against that move. He made me cry, actually, when I told him where we were moving, and he told me how absolutely ridiculous that move was. But you see, family businesses have a different set of circumstances. Somebody who is 40 years older than I was had a completely different outlook on life, and he was much more conservative, and I was ready to take a risk. So, you have to deal with that, power struggles. But it turned out to be great, and it was all his idea, and everybody's happy. So, then when I got to be 40-something, I also thought, no succession plan. So I married this wonderful guy, and we adopted these two darling children who have bought for our store, and I think I've got a good thing going until this one, who's now 13, is kind of like, business. I hope she comes back around. My parents loved working together, and I still think about them, and back to the mental thing and the visualization. Although they're, I hope, in heaven now, I still ask them questions, and I still get answers. I don't know where it comes from. Maybe it's in the DNA, maybe it's God, maybe it's the universe. I don't know, but it does happen. And I like to visualize. I'm going to challenge you with a question. I don't know if you want me to do it during this time period or another, but this is an old picture that just reminds me of my visualization of people coming into our store, money coming in, good things happening. The Denver Mint, I just thought it would be a good idea if I had my picture sitting on top of a lot of rolled copper that was going to become money. Bet they wouldn't let you do that today. But my very favorite award, and I've had several over the years, was this handmade award that my mother made for me. And I bring this up because it says the Waterford Coaster Award 1979. This award is made on behalf of Waterford lovers for distinguished service in the application of improvisation, the conversion of butter into wine and wine into gold. Because we had this little Waterford thing for $25, and it was a butter dish in our store. And I stood there and looked at it for the longest time, and I thought, $25 piece of Waterford, how can I sell this to people? We don't do butter that way like they do in Europe. And I sat there and I thought, it's a wine coaster. Put up a sign, ran an ad. We started selling hundreds of these butter dishes, to the point we were a big Waterford dealer in the scheme of things at the time, and they called and said, what are you doing with all of those butter dishes in America? You're the only people we can sell them to, and we're selling hundreds. So my mother made this award for me, which I thought was really cool. So our big announcement for our little family business is that little house in Brookside. I always go back and visit it, and I always told the lady who's there, can't I put some merchandise in, which I'm going to tell you about, but I just need to put this one product in there. Just please give me some shelf space. It's my home. Well, she called me one day and she said, well, guess what? I'm pregnant, and if you want the space, you can have the whole thing. So, as of yesterday, Home Sweet Home, Brookside, number 2. So we're going back home to that little house, which now has the thing built out front. And we're excited about it. And so now we have some new challenges, etc. But I'll tell you about this visualization later.
Thank you.
But anyway, it's exciting.
Joe?
Okay, I'm not as long, but I will tell
Nobody
you,
has as much baggage.
I will tell you, my dad was a visionary. He had a PowerPoint back in 1972 when I started work. He stood right in front of me and pointed and said, get off your butt and go make calls. And that was a powerful point. I'm a 1972 graduate of Oklahoma State School of Business. Took classes from Lee Manzer, and I'm assuming a few of you have had Dr. Manzer's classes. And I thought he was old then, so it kind of surprises me that he's still teaching. My degree's in marketing, and like I tell people, I studied hard, made my grades, I was ready to graduate, I started interviewing and trying to see where my talents and personality and skills could match the job requirements, where I could go and benefit the company that I'm working for and improve myself. And so I decided to go work for my dad. It seemed like the right thing to do. He had a small manufacturer's rep company in Tulsa that he had actually left it to go on to some other businesses. So this little rep business that he started in 1951 was kind of unattended and just sitting over there coasting and nothing happening to it. So I went to work for that company, and over the years I have built it into what we think is one of the premier rep organizations in Oklahoma. Sales this year, probably total sales are running about 25 million. So we're pretty pleased with the way that's worked out. A little bit of quick family history. My dad was dirt poor coming out of high school, was given a scholarship to wrestle at OSU, and came up here on a wrestling scholarship, and he felt like he has always owed the school a payback for giving him a chance to come up and have an education. So my dad wrestled up here, my Uncle Bob played baseball up here, my brother played football, I played football, so we are deep orange blooded people. I've been fortunate enough to, I currently serve on the foundation, or the Board of Governors for the OSU Foundation. I've been on the Board of Directors for the Alumni Association. I've served on the Athletics Council. We are deep into what OSU is. As a manufacturer's rep, many of you probably don't understand that concept. We represent about 17 different products to the energy industry. So all the natural gas that you have delivered to your dorms and your houses comes through the filters that we sold to Oklahoma Natural Gas. The gas is pressured and regulated through valves that we sell to the gas company. We sell heat exchangers, valves, boiler cleaning equipment, fans, dampers, expansion joints. Andrea sells small, pretty, sparkly stuff. I sell big, great, ugly stuff. And
he doesn't have to have any inventory, is the really cool thing.
Yeah.
There it is again. I'm the one with the baggage. He's got it real clean.
Being a representative, all we have to sell is our time.
Expertise.
And expertise. I've got sons. As a matter of fact, most of y'all are business school grads. I don't know if any of y'all had Jeff Bartlett as an academic advisor coming up. I don't know if anybody had Jeff. My son Jeff was an academic advisor for the School of Business for 3 years. I hired him a year and a half ago to come work for me, and he's doing a great job. My other grown son, Greg, is the director of the website for the athletic department. He runs OKState.com. So we're pretty deep up here still. And that's really all I have as a rep. Our outlook on business, we're fairly small. And with Jeff and I in the company, now 50% of our company is family. And we can talk later about dealing with non-family members and how that works. But that's basically who we are and what we do.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I guess the first question, listening to the stories, each one of you has had experience in non-family run businesses and now are in family run businesses. So I guess you're ideally qualified to comment on the differences between family owned and operated businesses and non-family owned and operated businesses. Each one of you have a shot at that, and what do you think are the important differences? Okay.
One key difference, and as I was thinking about it, is the control is in the hands of very few people. In the case of my family's business, the control is in the hands of 6 or 7 people. In my business, the control is in the hands of one person. And I think when you work for a large corporation or others, you've got a lot of different layers and a lot of different people making decisions, and I think that's one of the key differences.
Oh, I had thought on that. I really believe there's it might not be a fair statement. I didn't spend a lot of time working with others, but I sell to businesses every day. We view those others, and I think there is an increased productivity in a family business, working ourselves day and night. Sometimes if you're not sharp, you can outwork them and supersede there. I think it is definitely a longer vision. I think you will see a bigger return on investment in a family-owned situation because you're playing with your own money. You won't take that risk of making sure that asset, that vehicle, that building, that inventory item, if you don't need it, you'll send it back, and maybe in the real business world, that employee is going to say, well, we'll just put it on the shelf and maybe it'll sell. And that. So I think in every little policy, every little day-to-day decision, it permeates.
It does, I agree with that. Short chain of command. You can make a decision based on gut feeling, or you don't have to answer to other people and justify through equations or whatever, or projections. You can react quickly. You can change on a dime. Passion and personality has a lot to do with it, I think. Every business has a personality, and you project that, and you don't have set work hours. It never kind of ends, which is a great thing about it to me. I'm always thinking about something new I can do.
A couple of things that I would add to that maybe is family-owned businesses have character. They have the character of the family. And corporations that are just based on corporate structure, one is the same as the next, is the same as the next, and you call on them, and very, very similar in the way the feel of the company when you go in. Family-owned companies, I don't care how large or how small, they have a character all their own. And it's very noticeable if you've been around it for any time at all. Another thing is the difference in how you can define success. Major corporate structure defines success strictly on quarterly profit, year-end profit. And that's, if you're not profitable, you're not successful. Well, a family business can be successful on a lot of different levels without having a big year-end profit. But if you're keeping family members employed, if you're keeping people, your family happy, if you're growing a business, you can grow a business without making a profit. And at the end of the year, you're really, really pleased with what you have. So there's a lot of ways you may have to redefine what success is with a family business. And you can be successful in a lot of ways besides just having a strong bottom line.
Yeah, I think that's important, appeasing all the different stakeholder groups as we mentioned. Although during the presentation you alluded to the fact that generally family-owned businesses tend to take this long-term perspective for some of the reasons that I mentioned. Do you think that is the case, as opposed to more publicly owned enterprises that tend to focus more on immediate results?
I think that a lot depends on your exit strategy. Right now, unlike Joe and the Bartletts, I don't have a family member working for me that's ready to take over and run my business. And I'll talk a little bit in some other questions about my son. I have 3 children, and one would fit into what we do in our business. The other 2 would not. But I would have a very long strategy in my business, grow it, last many, many years, if I have a succession plan. If I don't have a succession plan, then at some point in time, I'm going to be forced to sell my business. And I will say that is very challenging for my employees. All my employees have come up and want to know when I want to bring my son on and have him in our business, because they see that as longevity to their jobs. And so, and there's some of these other questions, and I'll speak more on that in a minute. But if you have a succession plan, I think you take a long-term approach. If you don't, then I think it's completely different on how you you look at the longevity.
I had the same exact response. My children moved to Houston out of college and worked for a year and a half. My brother is my only active business partner, Stan, and his children moved away and went to work, and I always wanted so much better for my kids than this. Sounds silly, but you do. I think, oh, please go do something better than this, because it's hard. It's hard work. But they both of our kids, his son and my son and daughter, ended up coming back. We were to a point where we were almost going to sell our business, had even entertained some offers. And you talk about a short-term planning session, that's it. And now, with them in there, we're still not certain whether they'll be able to run it. It's a daily adventure. We're not sure that they're going to want to stay to run it.
Or work hard enough.
Well, there is all of that in it, but our vision now, I've seen it in every little decision. We were looking at some other software things, and now with all our internet software and all of the things that make us look like a Staples and a Depot and all of the things that we're having to do, we were in a procession of putting patches on this and doing things, and now we're looking at what do we need to get for a 10, 15, 20-year fix on these things. So without a question, that length of time can change based on the succession issue. If they all left right now, the succession planning might get really short. Really short.
But I think also, looking at all of you and thinking about that you might be starting a business, a startup business, what you have to look at, in my opinion, is the long term, because it is highly unlikely that your business is going to start making you a lot of money that you can take out and buy a new car and all of that for many, many years. If you're going to grow a business, unless someone is capitalized, maybe you have a big inheritance that you can start something with, but if not, if you're really starting up from scratch, like I did, many people did, you have to plow that money back into the business for a very long time. So you have to have a long-term goal or a long-term thought that I want to build that business more than anything. I remember my mother saying, you know, I'd quit if I could collect my back pay because you don't get paid a lot of times. You take out what you really need, but it's a long time before you get a really great salary. And hopefully you do, and then it's wonderful, but it doesn't start immediately.
There's a converse to that sometimes too, that when there's a family business and the second or third generation comes in, and sometimes the business is up and running and doing well, and the founder of the business wants to reward those kids that are coming in. And I've seen that, I don't know why I'm saying this, but just as a caution to you, one of the biggest problems I've seen with an ongoing family business is that they pay the kids coming in too much. And the kids find out, they get it in their mind that it's too easy.
Easier than it is.
They think it's too easy, too quick, and you don't learn how to work on the front end like a family business needs to be worked. And that, the 85% that don't make it, I would suspect that over half of those are because it's made too easy for the kids coming in, and they haven't had to learn those lessons of the things that make the business, a family business, really work, and that is hard work.
And I'll tell a story about what Gary's point, kind of taking a little different twist on it. My son is 33, has a new baby, has a good job, being paid very well, and he wants to come work for me. And he would come work for me for less money if I asked him to. And his stepmother, my wife, says, I understand you're thinking about hiring Will in your business. And I said, yeah. And she said, well, we got to talk. That's never good. And so I said, okay, what we going to talk about? And her point was, Gary, that you need to pay him for what he's worth. And you need to make sure that your company can afford him and help him make a good living, working hard, but but at least pay him what he's making in his current job, or don't hire him, because it's not fair. So there's two different, and this is a stepmother taking up for my son, bringing him into my business. And so it's really made me step back and think, do we have enough growth in our company to take on a high-level employee?
Of course, if you were making less with the carrot of if this, this, and this happens, you're gonna make even more.
There's clearly incentives, and there will definitely be that. But it's just it's something that we're trying to work through, and then how do you adequately compensate when you make a transition of ownership for his brother and sister? And so all those things are challenging as you work through this family business.
I think one of the themes kind of emerging from this discussion is the fact that we all want better for our kids. So one tends to protect the enterprise because we want to pass something on to the kids, which kind of leads me to the next question. Do you think family-owned businesses tend to be less risk-averse than non-family businesses?
I think the opposite, because as Gary talked about, there isn't anybody but us worrying about the return on our investment.
Right.
And if we need to take out less money out of the company to add 3 new employees, or to open up a new shop, or to take a risk, it's just us making that decision. And I think, at least in my company, we'll take more risk than less to grow it.
That's interesting. Joe?
Well, I wrote down less risk averse, but that's kind of a triple double negative.
Right.
But I wanted to just finish up on this other topic. You're talking about wanting to pay your kids or for them to have better than you. I went to work selling computers in Tulsa, and boy, it was fat living. I was making $6,000 and $7,000 a month in '81 out of college, living the big life over there on Riverside Drive. And my dad called, and I'd always wanted to be in business for myself, but a family business kind of a thing would fit that too. So my brother had $2,000 or $3,000 saved up, and he gave that to my dad to inject into the business. I hadn't set any money back, but I was having a good time. So I came in and worked for 1 year, and about 3 or 4 months at no salary. You can't hire people that way and say, well, there's a carrot down here. But if you'll come in here and work for 1 year and 3 months, we'll give you a little to live on and that type of thing. And we flooded ourselves into the business. All these statistics are amazing, and I'm very curious. Back when I was in school, if I remember right, the 2 main reasons businesses go out of business, a poor accounting system, or they take too much money out in the early years. And we really slugged it back early. So as far as hiring my kids and having them have it better than me, not a big problem in the early years. But it does, you do want them to have it better. And it's a battle constantly. Are you doing too much? Are you making it too easy? And you don't want to just purposely make it hard, but you know that it's healthy probably. On the aversion question, I put less risk averse in that we risked it all a lot of times when we started this. Without question, we would be more able to incur risk. But I think that as you get into 30 years in business and you have kind of set yourself into a point where you do have a little bit of money, you become more risk averse in a way because you won't risk that something you might have risked in the past because now you've got something and you don't want to lose it. So there's more planning in this man's opinion than maybe a private or public enterprise. That makes sense?
It does, it does. I think that's what I was saying earlier about my dad at 70-something didn't want to risk the same things I was willing to risk at 20-something. But I think in general, our family business is probably riskier in a lot of times than another type of business because we can take a chance quickly. And maybe that's good and maybe it isn't. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. It's that gut feeling, that visualization. But we can also make the thing happen if we want to work hard enough. So I think maybe a little riskier because you don't have to have as many business plans and answer to as many people and hash things out as long. You can take a risk.
You know, a couple of things that just, one, you know, I'm more willing to take a risk because of what a guy said to me one time. He said, the way to make the right decision is to make a decision and then make it the right decision. You work it to make it right. So if you can go take a risk saying, I think I can make money at this, and then you work it until you do make money at it. And that's in a family business, small business, that's something you have some control over and you can make that happen. The other thing is, I've told the son who came to work with me that, because obviously he'd like to make more money than what he's making right now, but I told him, you know, having money is fun, but making the money is where the fun really is. And I think we have found that we would still be doing this. We're not doing it for the cash, we're doing it because the satisfaction of making the cash really makes it worth it. So that's one of the big bonuses you have in a family business, that the thrill of making it and the satisfaction of doing something within the family carries a lot of weight to it, and you can't put a price tag on that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense and probably explains a lot of the success of family-run businesses. You can't, if you risk averse, of course you don't have that kind of success. It makes sense. I'm not going to phrase the next question as a question because I'm going to take the answer for granted. And that's kind of, how does family dynamics impact on business, and how does business dynamics impact on the family? Put another way, family problems spilling over into business, business problems spilling over into family. Your experiences with that?
In my business, I work with, on a regular basis, 20 different families, is what we do. And in working with those families, divorces, jealousy, moving geographically really put a strain on family businesses, big time. And in our family, I had a brother that went to jail for 20 months. And we had to pay a whole lot of legal fees in his defense. And I mean, and it cost our family a whole lot of money. And that puts I cannot tell you how much strain that puts on a family. And I will say, as a family, we decided that we loved our brother, and mom and dad loved their son more than we loved the money that he cost us. And so we're still able to come together and have Thanksgiving and Christmas and love one another, but it was really hard. And I wouldn't say that all the wounds are completely healed over and gone. But for the most part, we do pretty well with it. But it cannot help but cause problems. And if a company's struggling and there's not enough money going out to family members and they're accustomed to getting a big check and then all of a sudden it's not there, it causes problems. And so, more so than with shareholders, because normally you're not sitting at the Thanksgiving table with your shareholders, or you don't go home and sleep with a 50% owner in your company. So, I do every night. Sometimes she's glad to see me, sometimes not so much.
And my view of that, I'll allude to something you referred to as well as you can't compartmentalize it. And at every meeting we start by some premise that this is business. And, let's just look at this from a business angle. And you gotta understand, we've been blessed with as many family members are involved. It's amazing that we haven't had more than we have. But we have had some. We have just finished paying off ex-fellow stockholder, ex-stepmother number 2. So we've had some of these kinds of issues that have gone through the business. I think that kind of speaks for itself if you follow that all through. And some of these things, we were almost where we had a buyout deal in place, and the divorce occurred. And some of it evolves so fast, you can't get the lawyers around to get it resolved in time to head off the next pending disaster. But you alluded to something in your opening remarks about family members that do not work for the business. That is where our biggest problem, in my opinion, comes from, is that the in-law's spouse or these kinds of issues. If it was just me and my brother, we go out in the alley, throw a punch, talk it over, we're back to work. And he and I kind of founded the company with my dad. But when you get this wife who thinks that that isn't fair, that they get this, and a part of this is your government forces our tax situations to be so intertwined with the business in such a way that it is the craziest game. The stockholders own all the buildings in the towns that we're in, and the stockholders rent those buildings to the corp, and we have to do these things. They're not illegal, they're what we're supposed to do. But all of that gets so intertwined, and if you were going to hire someone and say, okay, keep it legal for everybody, you'd need about 5 people in a little company our size. It's just crazy. But it's very difficult, and you can't separate it, and our position has just been to try to make it as even as we can and tell them you love them every now and then. And it's difficult. It sounds corny, but it's the way it works.
Try to have a good sense of humor, right?
Oh.
Can't.
Best you can.
You can.
Andrea, any experiences of?
Well, I think a lot of things happen over the kitchen table, and the dining table. It's just hard when growing up. I mean, that was our board meeting. You asked if there's ever a meeting. It was every night. When we had dinner with my parents, it was what went on at the store today, and how can we solve this, and what can we do, and how can we do this, and that was the dinner time. I didn't know any different until I married Gary, that it wasn't, that people didn't work 7 days a week and think about this all the time. He said, you don't really have to do that. I said, oh, yes, I do, But he's, over time, he's really helped a lot in keeping the family and the business a little bit separated. And of course, our kids are my biggest joy. So I try to really compartmentalize time for them. But it really does happen all the time. And even when we try to have a date and we say, like you said, business, we're not going to talk business. We're not going to talk about Bartlett equipment. We're not going to talk about Nielsen's. And then we kind of look at each other. Okay, what will we talk about? The weather? I mean, it always, we do a little better than that.
OSU football.
Yeah, exactly. Which comes back to my vision eventually. But anyway, it is hard. And
I'll give 2 examples of that have happened with my customers fairly recently. One customer, father founded the business, 3 sons work for him. The father gets esophageal cancer, thinks he's going to die. Appoints the eldest son as the president of the company. Dad goes off to get medical treatment and supposedly to pass away. And so the eldest son runs the company for 2 years. Dad gets better. Dad comes back to the company. Well, the son's the president and been running the thing. Dad comes in and starts telling them how to do things different and run around and says, well, Dad, I'm the president. Well, yeah, I'm back now, so you're not the president anymore. Well, Dad, this is the role I took. And so he goes to the 2 brothers and said, guys, back me on this, because actually Dad had given to each one 1/3 of the company. And he goes to the brothers and he says, guys, back me on this. And the brothers say, gosh, you know, you're right, but Dad's Dad. And he started the company. How can we go against him in favor of you? So the oldest son said, okay, I want to buy you guys out. Or you buy me out. But I'm not going to stay like this. And they ended up buying him out. He went to work for a competitor, and they don't talk to each other anymore. And it's a really sad thing, because they're all good people. And one other instance that I just had lunch with a guy today, that 5 siblings had owned the company that he was president of. And the company, under his leadership, the company did extremely well. 2 of the siblings decided, you know, the company's at a high right now, we want to sell out. We want to cash out of this thing. He didn't have enough cash to buy him out, and they forced him to sell the company so that they could get their cash out of it and go on their way. So he's 57, 58, retired, has cash, but nothing to do. And he's not happy. And he would, if it wasn't for the siblings wanting to cash out, he would still be operating the company, making good money, and being a whole lot happier. So these are the kinds of things that can happen. You know, kind of the downside of it if you don't prepare around for it.
And I can tell you an example in our family. I've got two brothers and a sister, and a mother who's living, and a father was living at the time, and we kind of divvied up the ownership of the company, kind of who was on the board, who had voting rights, etc. My mother had absolutely nothing to do with the business, didn't understand it, didn't know anything about it, never came to the office, nor did my sister and younger brother. And my dad dies. And about a week after the funeral, my mother calls. And she says, I'm going to sign every check. I'm going to make every decision. I am in 100% control of this company. And as nicely as I could, I said, you need to look at your ownership in the company. And you would have to get 2 of the other 4 of us to agree with you on this decision, and I don't think you can. So you need to cash your checks and get on with your life, and don't worry about how we're running the company, because we're doing fine. And it was really hurtful to her at first, but she clearly didn't know what she was going to do or how she was going to do it. But in an emotional time, whether it's greed or control or whatever, family members have the ability to make really poor decisions. And she was about to make a really poor decision, but luckily, in our succession plan and some of those other things, we worked out the ownership, which would not allow her to get this control. And she's better off for it. But family, I mean, I love family businesses. I make my business off working with family businesses. But they are challenging, especially in that next generation, that handoff of control to the next generation, just as Gary was talking about.
I guess the kind of 2 inevitabilities is, one is that family issues are going to impact on business, and the second is that the overwhelming majority of people sitting here are going to end up in family businesses. So if I had to ask each one of you to give them advice on how to navigate these issues, what would you say to them?
Talk about the hard stuff. If there's an issue with the family member, whether you're with your brother or sister, your mom and dad, or cousins, or what have you, in my opinion, in the families that we work with, those that have the ability to have an honest dialogue using facts can come to good decisions. Those that want to revert back to when they were children and you beat me up or you pushed my bike over or you did this crap to me 30 years ago and I'm going to bring that up today is really hurtful. And so just honest, open dialogue using facts.
Gentlemen?
I'd say flee the area, don't even ponder it. That sounds corny, but even if you're pondering a business venture with a partner, if it's something you can do alone, I'm not certain you wouldn't be, if you can. Now, in our experience, my dad left our company early, and about 86, and we had only been working there 4 or 5 years. My brother Stan and I could not be more different. On any given issue, you really weren't sure where we'd be, but you could be convinced that we would be separate on that issue. Whether it was collections amongst customers or marketing of product, it didn't matter. We were going to be opposite. But in some beautiful, weird way, it kind of, I think either one of us left to run the company would have bankrupted it. Because we were both polar, and that kind of brought us back to the middle because people would look at us like you're both idiots, and we'd find common ground. But I really believe that it is such a challenge, in my experience in it, like many of these guys, it has been that if it is a situation you're looking at that you can do alone, that might be the better decision. Now, if you're in a situation, there's any of you that might possibly go back and work with your own family? Really? Flee the area. But no, it's just like he said, you really can't sit down and talk about all of the things that might come up. And in our experience, my brother and I, we did great for a lot of years, and boy, there's some real pressing things. After 30 years, new things are coming up that don't seem fair to our wives, is where a lot of that comes up. You can't begin to sit down and conceive where this is going to go and what could happen. There is no doubt that there is a synergy, that there is something else about seeing those pictures that you just showed. I could show some old pictures of my children helping us put together our little store in Alva. When I was commuting up there for this building we had just bought for little or nothing, and we were fixing it up. In the early tough days, it's just precious to you. And you get older and you almost feel guilty about paying yourself, or guilty about leaving at 5:30. I want to make sure I'm there after my kids to make sure they understand this is the example
That's how you do it.
of how we got here. But it is possibly, other than my marriage and my kids, it is the greatest blessing of my life. As crazy as that sounds from what I've been saying. So it can be the greatest thing, and there's no way to preconceive it all. But learn from what you hear tonight of the downside of it. Because there is a downside to it. There's definitely, without question, an upside to it. When you get in the biggest challenges, there ain't nobody going to fight and make it work harder than that person, but than a family member.
I'm curious how many of you grew up in family businesses? Okay, and that's why you're interested in this subject, right?
So you know what we're talking about.
You know, you can be up here too. But you, at your age, you possibly face power struggles with the next generation ahead of you, with the older generation. Maybe.
Any pearls of wisdom from yourself, Andrew, and how they should navigate these?
Well, I think try to take some kind of I guess you sort of said an adult perspective. You were saying, don't bring up the issues. Well, the big problem is, like when I started taking over my father's parents' business, it was both of them, but it was really my dad that I had the kind of power struggles with. He was my dad, and I'm his little girl, and then there's the gender thing, and you're a little, even though he had raised me kind of like a son in a way in the business, but at the same time, he wants to protect his little girl and don't take too many risks and honey, don't be, and it's still your father, and you still respect that person, and so you tend to get, your roles tend to get mixed up. Like you would say a different thing to your boss than you would say to your father, or vice versa. He could get in the kind of punishment, or, I told you, not to do that. Now, he wouldn't say that to another employee type of thing. So, if you can all raise your consciousness to a more adult, let's have a conversation and not get into all the emotional baggage from the past, or forget that what our family relationship is, let's make the best decision for the business. Possibly it would be better and easier.
And I would say and I am fourth generation family business. And I will say with my father, if you disagreed with my dad, or took a different opinion, he felt I was being disrespectful. And so it made arguing or having a honest, open dialogue impossible. And I have really tried with my children that we can disagree, and we can have a discussion, and we can keep it adult and work through things. I have the final say, but we can have a discussion about things without it being disrespectful. And that, because it was impossible to disagree with my father. It was almost hurtful for him.
I'd like to add just, you say if you ask for advice for those going into family businesses, I think one thing that would be very helpful is to, if you want to go into the family business eventually, get a job in the field, in a related field with somebody else. Get some experience and get some credibility outside of the family, that you bring that credibility in with you. It makes it a lot easier for you to deal with parents if you've got experience somewhere else. So I think, as far as
You might have
advice,
some good ideas.
yeah. So establish your credibility
Big learning.
outside of the family business, then you can bring that back in. I remember when I first started to work, one of the men that I was calling on, trying to sell large process equipment, was a dad of one of my good friends. And he thinks of his son, who always graduated from college, he thinks of his son as that scrubby, neat little, buzz haircut boy that grew up, and I'm just one of his son's goofy little friends that hangs around the house. It was real hard for me to get credibility with him. It took 10 years, 15 years to get where he really trusted what I had to say, and then maybe I really did have something to offer to him. So, it is hard to get that credibility with the adults that you grew up with, but going to work for somebody else and coming back in would be a nice way to work that with your own family members.
Okay, guys, great. I think that's enough from me. Let me just open up the questions to the class. Who's going to go first? Yeah.
How do you find the, challenges or not challenges against managing employees who are family, employees who aren't family, like if they're on a similar kind of level? Like how do you obviously have to treat them equally, but how do different employees see it and how you treat each other?
I can tell you if my son does come to work for me, I'm going to expect him to work harder than anybody in the business but me. And if he doesn't do that, it's not going to work out. And I'm going to make that really clear up front, because I think showing favoritism in my business to a family member, I would lose credibility with my other employees.
The Merrifield of the species is not too sharp, so we usually listen to them quite a bit. But we have had 2 store managers, Alva and Ponca City, been with us since the mid to late 80s. And it's hard, are they sitting up, thinking, man, this couldn't be a more dead-end career job, and you assume that they are at peace with their world, and we try to reward them, hopefully, for their efforts, but there isn't a lot of upward mobility in their rear view mirror or front view windshield, I wouldn't think. And And it hasn't, to my knowledge, been a big issue, but it is a challenge. There's no doubt it's a challenge, and you have to be careful of the nepotism and how you handle certain situations. But in our experience, I think we're rougher on family than on the non-family without question in our world.
That's the way it always was at our store too. But we have employees that worked in family businesses and employees whose parents were company people. And the company people raised employees, I've just noticed, from my sociology background, they are the ones that clock out at 6 and never think about it again. And the family business raised people tend to think outside of work, of ideas they can bring to the store, and they don't seem to mind as much when I hire a family member. The one over here is scared of family members, but they're willing to take that dead-end job to have time, and maybe they're the smart ones, who knows, it's time or money, right? And if you're taking the dead-end job and you get a lot of extra time. Now, I couldn't live like that because I like to say the sky's the limit every day. Today may be the big day, It just makes it a lot more exciting.
If you have a non-family member that you really like and is really productive and good for you, you compensate them liberally and you make it such a good package that if they're family or not, they can't get a better deal anywhere else. And they're happy to stay with you. The one I've got a salesman been with me for 31 years now. A secretary been with me 17. And if you don't want to lose them, then you just compensate them accordingly and make sure they're comfortable. And then if they have questions or concerns, you just address them. No, they're not ever going to be family members, but they can be treated like family. And like we say, we don't really hire people, we adopt them. And then we try to treat everybody like family if you are or not.
Lindsay?
I actually have a question regarding the power struggle that y'all had mentioned earlier. Now, especially for you, Frank, what you had mentioned is that if your son didn't work as hard as you did, that it wasn't going to work. Now, do you feel that that was the same situation for you?
I said I want him to work harder than everybody but me.
Everybody but you.
He's got a family, and I understand that, and I don't. And so
Sure. But have you ever thought maybe he's you, when you started back? Did you ever put yourself in his position? Maybe he's thinking of new and innovative ways that he could expand the company, move it forward?
if you were to see my son and he was sitting right here, he would be me. I mean, in so many ways. And I would guess I got a little ego still left in these old bones that I'm not totally out of testosterone. And so I want to accomplish something.
Right.
But yet I want him to grow and do those things. So I'm wrestling with myself on this thing. I need to figure out how Joe did it. But with me, I don't have another store to put him in. I mean, we're one shop. And so I'm wrestling with myself. If you're asking about the power struggle, it's with me. Giving up some of that.
Okay, so it's just difficult.
For me, it is.
I'd like to speak to that just real briefly.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
I have a recent graduate, my children both recently graduated from OSU, and my son went to work for a multi-state business technology type company and did bring in expertise, but on certain issues, and he and I have daily discussions, head-to-head, office near one another, and it's exciting. And he has no remote vision of my goals. My goals are 2020, 20 million by the year 2020. 2020 vision. His are 20 billion and multi-planet. I mean, he is ready to go. And it's exciting. And I'm inspired. He's a sharp guy, I hope. But every now and then we'll talk about an issue and I'll swear he's dumber than a rock. And I'm just like, you can't be serious. And he'll say, well, you can't. I wouldn't even mess with doing that. We're not interested in those meetings. Well, he comes in the other day, he got a little bid for $57,000 on these chairs. It's paperwork, we drop ship it, $7,000 in the pocket. And I'm sitting here making sure this grandma's happy with her little typewriter ribbon or whatever. So there's a lot of very varying philosophies, and it's starting to prove that he was right. My dad brought us in '82. He left in '86 and wisely just said, your deal, go get him. But he got 5 years in to Brandis, and it was not something he challenged easily. So I've been now with about 1.5 years with my children, and I'm not sure it's going to last 5 years. Every now and then he'll just make the statement, well, where we're at right now on our internet software deal on this issue, if we're not going to change that, I'm going to leave here within 1 year or 2. He will literally make that. I don't know whether he's serious or not. Every now and then it's just like, well, there's the door. And it can get that frank. He's extremely strong personality. And having been through what I have been through, I am as well. Love him to death. I'm excited to turn it over to him. But I feel like it's a bit early. And it's a challenge to know when it's right. I'm looking forward to it. Just to see what happens. But I'm not comfortable yet knowing whether they would sink the boat or whether it would become a spaceship. It's really crazy. But it's very exciting because I'm dealing with your generation head to head every day. It's fun. We just got back from a trip to Dallas, my brother and my business partner and I. I'm our computer guy, so it's kind of more my department. That's how my business partner and I have, one way we made it work for the advice issue is these are the things that I handle for our company. These are the things that you handle, and do as much of that as you can. But we took his son and my son on the trip with us. Golf in Dallas, business meeting, kind of generation, we're grooming the future gang. But they're looking at this technology saying, well, I like all that, but Staples can do this, and so we're not about to go with a product that can do that. And I'm like, well, our budget's a few dollars under theirs right now, guys. And so there's a lot of it, and it's exciting, and it's fun. But I'm looking forward to the day when I can just go up to work and just look in and say, I'm going to go out and make calls. You have a good day. And let them do it. And he is very eager to do it. So
Part of Joe's, he's got a little bit better deal than I do. My son graduated from OU. That's part of my problem.
well, I can make your decision for you. There.
Okay, next.
Have you ever had problems with a non-family member employee feeling like they weren't getting the same treatment as maybe a family member on their same level?
I haven't, because I do what Gary does. Take care of them. Treat them right.
Haven't seen it. Yeah, if they feel that way, they haven't ever said anything to us.
I don't think they've said anything. I do think there's that little worry every once in a while that I see in people, like, if this family member's coming in, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? There's an uneasiness a little bit.
And now my employees have come up asking me what's going to happen if I drop dead, because that's a problem. And but not because of another family member working in their place.
After the office party, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And 30 years of business, I can't fathom that it hadn't happened. You know it has. And we have some turnover.
Right.
So it may be that it happens and we don't even know about it. It may be more rampant than we're aware of, but I can't really speak to it.
So do you expend more energy in appeasing the concerns and aspirations of family members or non-family members?
We have one employee policy in our office: work hard or get fired.
Okay.
And so complainers don't tend to stay around very long, but I don't think it's because of family member issue.
Okay.
I think we've offset it by being tougher on family, probably, is why it's not as big of an issue. I say that. If you have an M on your chest, then you tend to make a little more, so it's not always the truth.
Frank, I don't mean to be on the power struggle still, but I'm kind of sitting in the same boat as your son is. Transitional phase. I'm a third generation. But expectation-wise, what do you think he's feeling coming in? Like, I never want to fail my father or fail my family. I mean, how did you go into it with your father?
My father was sick and I didn't have a choice. It was not the career path that I chose. It chose me. And with my dad, my mother realized that he and I were not going to be able to work together on a daily basis. And so she was smart enough to move them to Florida. And so I was left running the business on the day-to-day, and then we'd have board meetings. Will and I get along much better than that and much different than that. And it's going to happen with my business. It's just timing and whatnot. But I think he and I are going to have a really strong understanding of what's his role and what's my role. And it will make our company stronger because he has a lot of the skill sets that I don't have. But if you and your dad are having these conversations, I would just say sit down and list through the pros and cons of what's going to happen. You're not ever going to determine all the problems, all the conflicts that you two might have. But just start an honest dialogue, I think, will really be helpful.
In terms of, a lot of your upper management positions are obviously dominated by family. You know, the main decisions are all made by family. And as much as you have other experiences and things like that, you all have a general streamlining background. How do you bring in new ideas from outside the family? Do you have a board of advisors? Do you have some other management positions that aren't family held, or is that something you don't really do?
That's a great question.
I'll address that because I rep 17 different companies. Many of them are family-owned companies. Almost without exception, the second in command in the company is a non-family member. And these are bigger companies, but that, and I get kind of tickled because when I first got exposed to this, a company out of Mineral Wells, Texas, Mr. Perry, the owner of the company, lots of personality, very strong, very spontaneous in some of the things he did. And he had a gentleman that was a non-family member that always came along behind him and smoothed over all the rough spots Mr. Perry created. A family member couldn't have done that, I don't think. It took somebody from outside that the other workers all trusted and felt comfortable with that could smooth those rough spots over. And a lot of the companies that I represent have that second in command, second level person that is very loyal to the company. My dad had that with the other company that he started. He had a non-family member that really was his number one go-to guy to take care of all the difficult issues. So I think that it's you can create that if you're aware of needing to have help from the outside, but having somebody non-family very close to you can be a real asset.
We do it a couple of ways. We really work hard at empowering our employees to disagree and to come up with ideas and to challenge. We have this thing called continual quality improvement. Everything we do, we kind of debrief periodically, and how could we have done that better? How could we have served our customer better? Is one way we do it. I hire young people. Half my staff's under 30, and I really like that. You all come with a lot of energy, and you don't know what you can't do yet, and so I find that very, very helpful. And then we send our employees to training, to conferences and other things, to get ideas of what other people in our industry are doing and how they're doing it.
Yes, sir.
I was going to say, my kids coming in, we got more ideas flowing around than we could ever begin to get done. That's one way. But I was going to reverberate what you just said. We're part of a national buying group concept. We went to Detroit to look at their website application that would allow us, which we can do now. You can key up our item or Staples item. It shows you our price, their price. We magically beat them 1% on every item. And we take this to the market with customers with Staples, Depot, or Max. And we learn that from the industry. We're not sharp enough to do that stuff ourselves. So that's the other resource that we go to get that.
I'm going to learn from him right after this. How to do that.
Yeah, Gary and Andrea, you both are doing business is great, but my case is a little bit different. If the spouse is not interested to my business, my wife is not interested to my business, and I'm wondering it could disturb my family life and my business life too. Would you give me some suggestion how to overcome this problem?
She wants to be in your
She
business?
doesn't want.
She doesn't want to be in it.
My wife worked for me for 2 days. Clearly wasn't going to work out.
But there's one thing to not want to work in it, but if it consumes you, if it consumes us, and our spouse is not at all bought in, doesn't want to have anything to do with it, that's a very difficult,
That would be a problem.
I hate to say, love me, love my business, that's maybe not fair either, but
Just
just.
kind of resolved to that.
It's a great question on
It
marriage.
is a
But
great
yeah,
Great
question.
question.
Yeah.
It is hard, but it has to be the right, yeah, it's hard.
And it isn't for everybody, but those that can do it, it's a beautiful thing. We couldn't.
You saw my parents' picture. I mean, that's how they got together. They both had a vision of the same kind of business. We're dating 2 other people. Those dates said, oh, you should meet Art. You should meet Dorothy. So they go on a double date and they start talking about this business they want to start. And they loved working together. It was fabulous, but gosh, it's not.
And growing up in family business, I was always fascinated with it. So when I met a girl, when Andrea was more or less married to the family
It
business,
really was. He's helped me a lot.
and so we have had this common. It's fun for us to learn each other's types of businesses.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with his.
But yeah,
But
it would be very difficult if you didn't have.
But he wants me to continue with mine, I think, so I don't get too involved in his. I'd be in there.
I wanted to think it's a lot harder than it really is.
I would love to do it too. I mean, it's just very fun. Once you like to sell, it doesn't matter really what you sell, if you learn about it.
That's right.
And I would say, excuse me, Judge, go ahead. Balance in your life is really, really important. And I've had a marriage that didn't work, and I don't know that it was because I worked too much or didn't work enough, but balancing your life with your partner, with your kids, just however you got it, you can't be all one thing and pay no attention to the rest of your life if you want to be a very happy person.
My wife and I have 27 years. I love her. It's my greatest blessing. She worked for me for 1 year, 3 months, and 4 days. I think that pretty well sums it up.
Yeah.
I know this is probably something that happens a lot in family businesses, but have you any stories in regards to hiring family members that maybe you felt sorry for because they're in a position that isn't really good, but they're not necessarily the most qualified, but you have that internal struggle between your need to want to help your family, but at the same time, there's that business aspect, and you have to help your business.
I put an employee in a next to impossible situation. I hired my daughter one summer to make some rather sophisticated math calculations and chart some decline curves on oil and gas wells. And she didn't take it very serious and really did a poor job. I mean, a bad job. and this employee had to come tell me about it. And unfortunately, I should have been the one checking her work and not another employee, but a really wise lady once told me that how do you determine which children get to come into your business? And she said, I'll never forget it, she said, it is not a birthright. They have to earn their way into their business. And so that's just my philosophy. And I've got 3 children. One is very well suited for what we do. The other 2 are not at all. And they know that, and I know that, and that's just the way we're going to do it. And I would never give them a job unless it was doing something that they were good at. And right now, that's not what we do.
Yes.
You think you're right?
Yes, we have, but I've, I look around this room and I hope no one's here that, some of this stuff, it's hard. There's some of the family things are hard to talk about, and you get into a situation, well, are you being too hard on that person? Are they right? Are you wrong? Are you not being as good a manager? And so I don't know, I don't remember now. I've been sitting here thinking about that situation, and it was with a brother, and he's now starting a business in Oklahoma City for us, and I think he'll do well. But he was coming off a divorce. He was a father of 2 children without a wife helping him. And so there was a lot of things going on, and we were very, very different. And but yeah, I don't remember how you worded your question, but I can just tell you, yes, we have endured that situation, and it was tough for him too. But I think that he was kind of a person, in this man's opinion, that would rise to what was required. And because I worked so dang hard, he wasn't having to do much. But now he's in a new position, and I think he's going to succeed and do well. But I think we've gained in value, both he and I, from one another, from that experience. And with the jury's out as to how well that'll all go.
Okay?
You gonna talk about it?
Well, we've hired several relatives, much lower, entry-level positions that we thought we should hire. And that's never a good reason, probably, to hire someone, looking back on it.
Well, Audrey hired one cousin that he was really good.
He was
He
excellent.
was excellent. Everybody kept commenting on what a great job he was doing and really progressing. And you're thinking, maybe take over the business someday. I mean, just that good a job.
By the way, I'm looking
Yeah.
for succession,
And he was doing such a good job, and one morning he said, I'm gonna go get a cup of coffee, be back in a little bit. And we're still waiting. And that was 7 years ago.
So how do you have Thanksgiving with him next time? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not easy. It just never was discussed.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I actually have a personal experience. I'd like your insights on this. I will never hire a family member. This is the reason. My dad and his elder brother were in business for about 8 years. It ended with both of them having a fight, and he basically driving my dad to the brink of bankruptcy. And ever since that happened, my dad has never spoken to his brother or his dad or his mom. And after first time watching that, that's the reason I would never want to have a family member in my business. What are your thoughts for that?
Well, it's easier that way.
It is clearly easier to not, it's harder. But my younger brother and I are very close. And we had a major blow up. I drove off and left him, and he had to walk about 2 to 3 miles home in the pouring down rain. We didn't speak for probably 3-4 months. But we got it out of our system, and now it's very, very enjoyable, and we're able to talk about a whole lot of things. Now, we don't work together on a daily basis, but I do work for him. And it is clearly harder to work family than other people, but never is a long, long time.
But to make an absolute statement like that, you might be depriving yourself of the best working partner you're ever gonna have. Don't know your family, don't know anything about it, but to say I'm never gonna hire anybody out of a group, you might be limiting yourself to a great opportunity too.
Sounds like in some way or another, you all grew up around family business. It was in your genes, you might say. Having kids around now, around the family businesses you have, so you're taking your past, you're now present with your children. Growing up around it, being there late nights with your parents, how do you feel that that affected you as a younger child? Did it give you the spark, the inspiration? How do you feel that might be affecting your children, possibly coming up in your business?
You know, I can't help but think about the mother duck, you know, going along and the little baby ducks start doing what the mother duck does. It's kind of like that when you're growing up actually in the business, doing your homework while your parents are working or whatever. You tend to learn it by osmosis almost. It's apprenticeship, really, growing up in family
And
business.
I will say my daughter has her own business. She's an audiologist. And my youngest son wants very badly to start his own business. And my middle son wants to go work for me. So, I mean, I don't know why, they all just seem to want to be in a small family type business.
In a family, you have to overlook your family member's faults to get along. In a business with a coworker or an employee, you know, you can have some pretty big consequences that come with, you know, overlooking a fault that you see him. You obviously have to choose your battles in a family business. I mean, you can't nitpick everything. But when you do choose your battles, how do you keep the peace while fix the problem?
Like I said earlier, don't revert back to that, your childhood. Do it as adults. Do it, try. I don't like to have mixed family vacations and business meetings. I hate it, because I'm never on vacation. Everybody else is. But I think taking care of business problems in a business atmosphere with a professionalism and not around the kitchen table is much, much better.
Any questions?
What about the obligation of a family business? I mean, most of you grew up in family businesses. I know a lot of us have. And, you know, I was taught to have pride in the business, take ownership in it. You know, it's you, it's an extension of our family. But what happens when you or your siblings don't want to come back and run the family business, but you feel you have to because you hate to see it die? What about that obligation, that stewardship?
Don't do it.
Answer that, dear.
Yep, definitely. And it turned out fine. But there was that time period. Of course, I had other things I wanted to do, and you know, a little guilt brought me back. Watching a tear, you know, come down my father's eye when I tell him I'm going to go and do this over here. And it's tough. But I'm glad it's worked out well, but yeah, I don't know whether it's something I'm going to try not to put it on my children, but I'm already sort of feeling it. That may not answer that.
You guys have all, kind of grown up in generational businesses now from I'm getting a perspective from. So have you ever thought of where you'd be or what you'd be doing if you hadn't? I say that because I have no family businesses.
That's my wife's most common thought.
What does she think
This
you'd be
marriage
doing?
issue that you raised, it permeates a marriage in every level and layer. The more players involved, the thicker it gets. And my wife is, when I married you. I saw you as this person that would supersede your brother. Well, I can't now. We gotta keep everything even. Everything's, and so it is. I have no choice but to think about it because it's part of my nightly discussion.
My wife would tell you the meanest thing I ever did, and we've been married 26 years, is I came home and I said, I quit my job today. And we had 2 kids in college and one about to start. And she says, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I've started my own business. And she says, do you have any customers? And I said, I have one. And she said, what do they pay? And I said, $700 a month. And she says, do you have an office? And I said, I found a place to rent. And what is the rent? $700 a month. I had faith that I could do it. But my wife is a non-risk taker. And she wanted me to go get my job back. And they offered me, the company I left offered me 3 different jobs, all better than the one I left. And I just had a stomachache. I couldn't go do it. Now, we've never missed a meal. We've never missed a mortgage payment. Kids' tuition got paid. But it was hard. It was a struggle. And so, and as I told her, I said, if we'd have waited till you were okay with starting our own business, we never would have started. But she still says that's the meanest thing I ever did. I didn't grow up poor. I grew up in a family with plenty of money. That was never a worry in my mind of not having money, even though we didn't have very much. She grew up very poor. And so she didn't want to be poor again. And so she had a whole different concept of our future and what was acceptable. And so, and this is kind of off the point, when you start your own business, if you have a partner, if you're married, you started a family business. Because there's no other way to look at it. Because you pay your employees before you get paid. And if you're going to bed, and as I do with my wife every night, she wants to make sure that we're going to get paid. She worries about that. I don't worry about it at all. So just understand that it's a family business.
I'd like to speak to that. When I got married, my wife used to date a competitor of ours when we just started in Enid, and they were a very 3rd or 4th generation company. He wanted to learn how to fly a plane. He went out and bought an airplane. I would have had to flap my arms. I mean, there was no comparison. So she assumed that everybody in the office product business were well-to-do. She married me, or when we were dating, we got engaged, and she said, well, what day of the month do you get your paycheck on? And I said, well, I'll go talk to Dad. He'll probably start paying me now like he has to my brother when he married. And she was just like, and we were already into this thing.
She'd already said yes.
So we went to get a home loan, and the guy gets my application, and I made $82,000 my first year out of college. I made $5,100 my second year out of college, and that was just because one of those checks came in on January of that next year. And he's sitting there and says, well, you're really climbing down the corporate ladder. You go try to get a loan with that on your deal. It was all I could do by the hair of my chin. But your marriage is so involved in this, so I can't begin. Whether she's involved or not, she's involved in every way, in a big way. And she needs to be on board. I haven't had it happen yet, but haven't given up.
Okay, I guess it's obvious that family businesses could be a long and oftentimes painful journey. Do any of your businesses or businesses that you've been exposed to have any formal structure, business council, family council, or process, regular meetings to kind of manage these difficulties?
We, in the family businesses that we run, we really encourage them to meet at least 2 times a year to talk about their finances, talk about their business, and we really profess to add what we call wise counsel to their boards, so that when they meet, we've done it with our family foundation for a long, long time. We tend to act better when we have people in the room that we respect that aren't family members. And so we really encourage all our foundation clients to have wise counsel on their boards that are not family members. And I'll take it one step further, and we really discourage spouses on family foundation boards. And that usually doesn't work in the first generation, because it's usually 2 people that created a foundation, a husband and a wife. And many times in the second generation, the spouses know the founders. But in the third generation, we really discourage spouses. It just makes it much, much harder. So that's kind of how we advise the families that we counsel.
Joe, anything formal?
We do not do that well. I do like what you said about witnesses. They seem to play nicer when your accountants are present or your attorney is present. It's just a lot. Yeah, it's kind of a more pleasant deal, but it's pretty much done by me and my brother at this point, and we're bringing in children and my other brother into this as an advisory deal, but we have not really got as good a situation as we do. I've always cried for it, a more formal situation in every facet. My father was not a succession planner. It was each day was a new day, and we'll deal with that with what comes up. And we're very poor in that regard.
Andrea, Karen?
Well, of course, we have a pretty small business, and at this point, it's me. When my parents were involved, the 3 of us were each members of the corporation, and we had meetings and minutes and all of that, and made decisions on that basis. Worked out pretty well most of the time. Now it's kind of Gary and I, so
And
we get along pretty well.
I initially, when my dad distributed the business between me and my brother and my brother-in-law and one other gentleman, and I, fairly early on, I bought them out. I was the only working member in the company, so I bought them out. When they were still in the company, we had twice a year we would have board meetings and bring everybody up to speed on what was going on. But since I bought them out, I can buy myself lunch and talk to myself a little bit.
Sometimes it takes me.
But no, I don't have any. Maybe it was any other family.
Okay, well, that's great. I think before I call up Rock and Lamar to summarize, can I open the floor for you guys to make comments and ask questions of the group?
How many of you were saying you want to go to work for your father?
I was saying that I'm like this right now. But yes, we're expanding.
Gary gave you guys a really good pointer. Go work somewhere else. Get some experience somewhere else. See how other people do business. You're going to come in with some fresh ideas. You're going to come in with some confidence and set some ground rules if and when you do go back to work for your families.
I think that I've exhausted my lack of expertise here, but no, in many ways, I don't think it came out clearly tonight in any way that we're the poster child for a lot of things you really shouldn't do, and we have a lot more family wounds than we began to discuss tonight, and it is something that you really want to think through. Like he's saying, I would be much more careful about that than be in any way thinking about going to work for another company. And we almost have a policy that you work for someone else first. It's unspoken, and you're going to bring in credibility. You're going to bring in new ideas, and it's a positive that way. that would be my recommendation as well. I've really learned a lot more.
Yeah, I'm learning a lot too, and you know what I'm really excited about is that there are so many, I guess it's politically correct to say this, but there's so many women in the audience. And I'm very excited about that. And when I started in business, one of the reasons, when I started my store in Stillwater in the student union, I could be my own boss and I could do that in the retail field was one that was pretty open to women getting excited about it. And then you don't deal with the gender issues that were very prevalent in the 70s when I was doing this. You know, I could have some, I mean, I couldn't join Rotary in Stillwater, Oklahoma. I could be a Rotarian, but I couldn't join Rotary. That's how far we've really come. And I'm excited that I'd love to talk to all of you, you know, what you're thinking, what kind of business you're thinking about starting. But I think it's a great thing, and I think every woman should not be totally dependent, even if they get married. You know, they need to make their own money, have to feel good about themselves. I think it's really exciting. I'd love to know what you all are thinking. The guys too.
I'll offer up one other quick anecdote as far as going to work for somebody else. Right before my senior year of college, I worked in the summer down in Mineral Wells, Texas for this family-owned company that my dad actually, when he started our business in 1951, this was the first account he picked up to sell for. So I worked down there for the summer, and so after the summer I'm driving back home and I'm kind of thinking, what did I learn working for these guys this summer? With all, and the thought crossed my mind that with all the goofy things that go on in a family-held company, I mean, like I said, the personality of the owners and the other family members and how all the interactions that we're talking about take place and the inefficiencies that can take place because, again, some people are working in positions that they shouldn't, maybe because they're family or they know somebody and it's a small town. But funny stuff goes on within companies. And you look at all the inefficiencies, and these guys are the very best in their industry. They're the top #1 company in what they do. And across my mind was, I wonder what it's like with the companies that aren't very good. That must really be a zoo. And so that's where I think you gain some insight working for somebody else, because when you work for a family company, sometimes it's a zoo, but it's a zoo everywhere. You know, the model that you're going to learn in school about how corporate America works is a great model, but it's made up of people. And, you know, our families are just people. And that's why it's going to be an eye-opening experience for you when you get into it. It doesn't run as smoothly as you think it should, but it's still it can still make money, still be efficient, and it's the best thing going. And I can't imagine, the question earlier, I can't imagine doing anything else. I was born to do this. So I hope, my hope for all of y'all is that you could get the same kind of, if you get into a family business, that you can manage it in such a way that you have the same experience that I do. I mean, I'm going to retire when they carry me out feet first.
You just have to be the boss.
That's it. It's good to be king.
One more thought on that thing, and you know, you say, well, you should go work for someone else when you graduate before joining the family business. That isn't that easy to do in America right now. There's not just 1 million people out clamoring. You guys are out competing against people with doctorates and masters and 30 years of experience for a job. Turn that thing around. This is just a thought. I don't have good ones sometimes, so you might want to wait it. But turn that thing around, and something that my son's discussion when he came in, and daughter, part of this is you may or may not want to do this. But you go, for instance, my son may come to work for our company, work 4 or 5 years. We just conclude that we're so diverse in our vision that he really doesn't want to do that, but he wants to go start his own similar company, or he gets a job with one of the vendors that we buy $250,000 a month from, or you never know where that can lead. So that it could be a flip concept in that you know, if there aren't a million jobs out there, it's real easy to say, well, go work for someone else when you guys are all gonna graduate, and it's not that easy to just walk out there and get a real nice job. You might be able to use that job and have that discussion with your dad going in. Dad, I'm not sure I want to do this. I kind of think that I do, but I might not. I might just use this, and I'll work hard, but I might just use this as a springboard to another thing. Now, when you go look at something on your application, at least it says you've worked somewhere for 4 years, and your salary was this, if you can get along with him that long. But, and that may be bad advice, because I give that a lot. So be careful. But it is a way to look at it in the way that my son and I have approached it, and my brother's son and he have approached it.
Thanks, sir.
I'm going to summarize the topics covered by Frank Merrick and Joe Merrifield. And some of the things that Frank Merrick said was, in a family business, whether you have a succession plan or not, plays a large role in the longevity of the company. In a family business, personal family issues do affect the business financially and emotionally, so it's best to be prepared to encounter that. Pay and treat your employees that aren't family members well, and you shouldn't have any problems with any jealousy issues or employees feeling like you treated family members better than themselves. For Joe Merrifield, as an individual that has had experience in being hired in a family business with low pay, you must hire family members for what they're worth. It's almost impossible to separate business and family, so you just have to understand the two and keep on moving. Flee. If you're pondering running a family business that you can do alone, try it alone. But if you do decide to go with the family business, it can be the greatest experience ever.
What we learned tonight from Andrea Nielsen Bartlett, when you start a business, it's always good to have a long-term vision for the business. Over the first years, be ready to reinvest money you make into the business. If you want to have a long-term business, pick the name carefully. Don't pick a name that cannot support what the business is about over the long term. And she gave an example about that work. When you want to deal with issues in the family business, try not to bring up personal issues. Keep the conversation focused on decisions to solve the problems of the business. Family connection should not be a reason to keep somebody at the job. If this person is not doing a good job, let him or let her go. If some siblings don't want to come to the business and you would like them to be part of the business, don't push, be flexible about that. What we learned today from Gary Bartlett, family business can be successful without necessarily making a profit. Most criteria of success for family businesses are not usually the same as for a corporation. Money coming into the business can be, for example, a reason of success for the business. If you want to go to work for a family business, try to get some job experience first in a related field by working with somebody who's not related to you, and all the speakers, they agree about that. For the benefit of the business, it's always good to treat non-family members as family members. Compensate them when you don't want them to leave. Treat them well. You can create possibilities to have new ideas from outside. One thing you can do is to include people from outside in the management team. They can bring a broader perspective to the company, new ways of doing things. And finally, if you need decision about hiring somebody either from the family or non-family might not be always helpful. First of all, look at the contribution this person can bring, whether this person is from the family or not.
John? Gary?
And Jerry, we have some news for you guys.
That's so nice.
I'm dying to find out about this stuff right
Okay,
here.
well, I'd just love to tell you about it. Do you all have a minute or not? Okay.
Of course.
You were talking about
This is
how
not
up
funny.
on the board, how things go, and I call it a bell curve or have a life cycle. And so I'm always looking for product that has a beginning life cycle, a young life cycle. And Julia Knight is a woman-owned company who designed this fabulous servingware, and each piece is hand enameled. When I pass it around, if you want to look at it, a thumb has actually painted every bit of this. And the reason she came up with this idea was she was doing lots of home entertaining for her husband's company. And she said, honey, I don't mind doing this for you, but serving pieces are boring. And he said, well, hey, I will back you in a new company if you can come up with something exciting. Well, I met her just as 4 years ago when she was just starting, and I think she hit the mark on exciting serving pieces. And it's very exciting to help her. I taught her how to do a signing event in our store. I'm helping, and it's growing much faster than my business. But nevertheless, so the other day, they did beautiful, or they do lots of colors, serving pieces, and lots of shapes, lots of sizes. Food safe completely. But I'm excited that there is orange, and there is now the new, you're the first one to see it, the new black with the Tahitian pearl. All that is hand cut inlaid pearl. Love the shape of this piece. But back to my vision. So we're at the OSU football game. And we're up there, and I am looking at this sea of orange, while my husband's vision probably is pretending like he's the quarterback or the linebacker, or what his next play is, or whatever. My vision, and this is my challenge question to all of you, so if you can help me think of this, there'll be big rewards. But so I am picturing all these people who have spent all this money coming to this football game and all this money on their orange little outfits and everything, and I'm visualizing each one of them serving something in an orange piece of Julia Knight in their home. And then I know about Julia Knight because I have it myself at my house, that it's like potato chips. You cannot have just one piece. So now I'm visualizing all these people having multiple pieces of orange and now black pieces of Julia Knight. Now my question to you, and the challenge from a marketing standpoint, is how do I, my little bitty company and her little bitty company, make this happen? It's a vision. Or you've got an idea.
Basically, since your focus mainly, you mentioned a lot on the color orange.
Well, I was just thinking that.
Market it in other campus towns that have the color orange, like New Mexico and Oregon.
That would be excellent. Now, how do I first get all of these people in the football stadium right here to have it?
I'm on the OSU.
See, he's the entrepreneur right here. Okay.
For a fee, you can have access to that full database. To give you guys an idea, there's a retirement community coming to OS, possibly to Stillwater. Very big dollars involved in this thing. Very big thing about OSU becoming a very big retirement community because the guys don't want to drive home after the game like I did at 4:30 in the morning. Tulsa. But there's some big, big money involved here. The banker would not lend this very multi-million dollar situation money without the OSU alumni board approval that they would have access to our marketing, and it gets a little sticky. It's getting a little sticky up here right now. I don't know if it's legal, but that is your angle. No, but that is there's an angle to all of this where there might be fruits on both sides.
Well, the thing is, everyone will love it. That's the reward is for them because they're going to love
They
it.
may become more creative after the beers.
I've got to tell you, when you're born an only child into a retail family, you never pass up a chance when you have a group of 3 or more people together to make a sales presentation. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, $26.95 can we take credit?
Okay, are you done?
Thank you guys so much.
Okay, guys, thank you.